probably don't know any better than humans how to make contact. Dude, snap out of it. Monson felt his heart palpitate as the ring of the first period bell cracked his dreamlike contemplation. Grey, seriously, you've been out of it for the last couple of days. What's your deal? Monson glanced around the room to see people packing up, getting ready to continue the first day of full classes in a week. Sorry, Case. He stood up, putting away his own unopened notebook. I haven't been sleeping very well the last couple of nights. This was completely true. Ever since Casey's revolutionary comment, Monson had gone out of his way to try to contact his mirrored self. That was 2 nights ago. However, he was finding that the stupid mirror image never produced itself on command. Because of that, he was currently trying everything in his power to recreate the circumstances in which his mirrors manifest. And yes, he meant mirrors, as there seemed to be 2. Of course, all that sounded strange, even to Monson. But what other conclusion could he come to? Once he had come up with the idea of trying to initiate contact with his counterparts, it seemed almost inevitable that he would end up analyzing those few times those counterparts revealed themselves. Coming to the conclusion that there were in fact 2 different Monsons besides himself was not something he came to lightly. It seemed impossible, but then again, it fit all the evidence. The mirror that he spoke to during his fencing practice seemed connected to that overtly dangerous feeling. He could feel it. It was something about his grating voice. It felt aggressive, but at the same time bored. Such a voice could keep you up at night, hair-raising and destructive, the polar opposite of a harmonious state of mind. Then there were the eyes, silver glowing spheres that seemed to bubble with some sort of unspoken power. Monson was willing to bet that in the few times that the foreign, dangerous emotion fell upon and dominated him, that a not-so-coincidental change in his own eye color materialized. He was actually very thankful for the revelation, as some of his previous befuddling experiences were now starting to make sense. Those upperclassmen, the ones that attacked him the very first day of classes, had run away from him. Him, a younger student who was alone, groggy from a smack on the head, and already on the ground. They had no reason to run away, especially from him. Yet they did. They ran from him like their very lives depended on it, and as sickening as it was, Monson now had to assume that their flight was for good reason. The second clone-like person, the mirror image that spoke to him in the weight room, was a whole nother story. Thinking back, though the delivery was a bit on the spooky side, there was not anything else remotely threatening about that experience. Assuming, of course, that nothing else happened after he passed out. That other Monson seemed to be really trying to communicate. He had even said please, desperately calling, hoping Monson would respond. The question was, why? Why was this alternate personality, that was what Monson was calling it until further notice, trying to speak to him? What could they possibly have to talk about? Was that normal for dissociative identity disorder? He seriously doubted it. Nothing in his Google search, which was a godsend by the way, said so. Monson even considered contacting some of the leading experts in psychology to ask. He was a Cornell University student after all. They would be dying to help him. That plan had some risks though. What if any of this got out? They would probably lock him up and throw away the key. And as fun as jail sounded, and really, it did, he was going to have to opt out of that one. He was far too pretty to be in jail. It was for this reason he decided to try and figure this out on his own, in the late hours of the night, hence the dozing through class. Tonight, he would again try and contact his wraith-like relatives, but maybe he would start a bit earlier and try not to stay up all night. Even crazy people needed some sleep. You know, Grey, you really should go and see that hot school nurse that Arthur was all up in arms about. Casey waved absent-mindedly to a blonde girl Monson did not know. She could probably find you something to help you sleep. Yeah, that's just what I need, thought Monson. Drugs mixed with psychotic behavior. That's a Dateline special waiting to happen. The boys gathered their stuff, hardly noticing the black-suited man in the back corner of the room. Hey, Gray, do you think that guy's even alive? Dude, don't be ridiculous. Seriously, man, who can stand that still? The soldiers at Buckingham Palace in London are supposed to be able to stand for hours without moving. Artorius was also packing up his stuff. I would think that these guys should be able to stand for at least an hour. Both Monson and Casey gave Artorius a blank, hollow sort of look. Artorius scowled in response. Why do you guys act so confused when I know stuff? Monson and Casey glanced at each other and broke into laughter as they did. Artorius' scowl deepened. And why does it seem that you're always making fun of me? Artorius' ringing phone saved Monson and Casey the trouble of answering. His hand shot in his school jacket. Indigo. Casey wiped at his eyes, the diminishing traces of laughter dying out. Ah, good times. He returned his attention back to gathering his stuff. Come on, man. We better move it. Our master's is going to make us do push-ups again. Monson did not answer, but quickly put his school things away, ever so conscious of the suited man behind them. They did not resume their conversation until they were properly in the hall. Casey pulled out his phone, checking for RSS updates and news from various websites. They finally started reconstruction of Barty Bridge. Seems Christopher Barty gave them the go-ahead. He even said he would put up the money. Really? Monson leaned over towards Casey, glancing at his BlackBerry. That's pretty cool of him. Not really. Casey shook his head as he fiddled with the on-screen keyboard of the phone. It's not like he had much of a choice. If he didn't, they'd be losing billions of dollars in revenue from the mainland travelers who'd use it. Monson straightened up. I guess that makes sense. He threw his hands around his head, copying Casey's gesture. Money sure does make the world go round, doesn't it? You got that right. A thought occurred to Monson, one that was curious enough that he dropped his hands and leaned in again towards Casey. This sudden movement must have surprised Casey, as he took an unsure step away from him. Dude, what does Barty look like? Casey's eyebrows shot up in a perfect replica of Monson's signature expression. Why do you ask? Monson had to wonder if he always looked that stupid when he did it. He answered the question. Well, if he is one of the founders of the Barty conglomerate, then he was partners with my grandfather. Yeah, that's certainly true. Monson checked the immediate surroundings, just to make sure that no one was listening. Beyond that, I just wanted to see a picture of him, you know. Maybe seeing his face will jog my memory. Well, I guess it couldn't hurt. Let's take a look. Casey pulled up a browser window on his phone. The home page of iGoogle loaded, and he tapped on the Images link of the search engine. Once that page loaded, he typed in Christopher Barty and tapped search on the mini keyboard. Many images came up, thousands in fact. Casey started choosing different ones at random. You know what's odd? Monson's head bounced from side to side. No, Case, what? Now that I think about it, I've never seen a picture of... You aren't going to find anything, Case. Apparently, Artorius was finally done with his phone call. Why's that? Casey sounded a bit befuddled. Christopher Barty hasn't been seen in public in like 10 years. Ever since his partner, who we now know to be Monson's grandfather, left the business. Monson and Casey gawked at the new information. What? Why? And how's it possible that someone that high profile hasn't been seen in public? It's actually not that hard to believe. Artorius had his eyes back on his phone. The Barty conglomerate is part investment company, part manufacturer, part wholesaler, part research and development firm, and part distributor. Yeah, the guy's loaded, but who isn't these days? I'm not, and neither is most of the world. Artorius scowled. You know what I mean, Grey. Barty isn't like the Oprahs of the world. He makes his money not on public exposure, but through actual business practices. Actually, I'd assume that a certain amount of discretion would be desirable. Monson harumphed. He guessed that Artorius' explanation was as good as any. What did he know about the business world? Still, the idea that there was not a single picture available made Monson very suspicious. It made him feel like Barty was hiding something. I still don't understand why you care so— Whoa now! Casey and Monson split apart as the pristine form of Ignace Ikeko came barreling around the corner, moving like a poltergeist running from a priest. Her appearance was immaculate, yet there was a definite and very real cloud to the silver lining of her state of mind. The girl was distressed, and it was painfully obvious. She halted, stopping just before she crashed into them. Whoa there, little darlin'. Monson grimaced. He hated it when Casey used that stupid accent. Better be careful now. Wouldn't want to have an accident now, would ya? Ignace shook her head, as if the thought of even speaking would cause her to lose her lunch. She stepped through them and left without saying a word. The three boys watched her go, very disquieted by the whole event. You know, she's a bit of an odd one. They all started walking again. That's rich coming from you, Case. Once again, Artorius started to play with his phone. Shut up, Arthur. How many times do I have to ask you not to call me Arthur? Casey contorted his face, giving him the appearance of an irritated weasel. At least once more. Hey, guys. Cassius, I think it's about time I give you that beating that you're so desperately in need of. Guys. Okay, Arthur. I would so destroy you, and you know it. Guys! What, Grey? Have you guys seen my phone? Casey and Artorius stared at him, then glanced at each other. A huge grin broke out on Artorius' face, and Casey sighed as he responded. I know you had it this morning. Remember I updated your firmware with the new Google operating system? Monson struggled to remember, but was finding it difficult, as he was awake, but not really present, as his mind was on other things. Are you sure you just didn't leave it in Miss Blake's class? Monson's lip dipped, and his head tilted. I suppose that's as good a place as any to start looking. You should stop messing around with that BlackBerry stuff, Grey. The iPhone is so much better. Just like Macs are better than PCs. Casey spun to face Artorius, sputtering indignantly. You really are a moron. There is no way that's true. Monson rolled his eyes. Not the Mac versus PC argument again. It was time for him to make his exit. He needed to find his phone. Guys, I'm going to run back to Miss Blake's classroom and see if I can find my phone. Artorius and Casey grunted, and then continued their argument, though Casey did yell after Monson. You'd better hurry, Grey. Professor Masters isn't exactly forgiving when it comes to being late. Monson threw up a wave acknowledging Casey's words. He ran back towards Miss Miranda's class. Monson walked a great deal slower than the time allowed. He was already on his way to being late to Professor Masters' class, which meant he would end up doing push-ups until he passed out. Ah, the joys of high school, he thought. He was just so tired. Maybe he would ditch and head back to his room, perhaps try to take a little nap. Maybe his other personalities would grow bored and make an appearance. Doubtful, but he could dream, right? Monson arrived at Mrs. Blake's classroom to find the door closed. Stupid. He should have expected that. There was probably another class in the room. He cursed his luck. Now, not only could he not look for his phone, but he still would have to do push-ups in front of the whole class. This was turning into a really sucky day. He sighed. Maybe he really would cut class, go back to his room, and sleep. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the trip, He looked through the small square window in Miss Blake's door. Maybe he could grab her attention and, just maybe, she would be willing to help him out. He peered through the window to an empty classroom. "Nice," said Monson aloud. "Now I can search for my phone." He popped the door open and moved back towards his seat. He looked at the desk and around the immediate area. No cell phone. Now that was a problem. That phone was probably expensive. It was not like he had tons of money to replace it. "No, it's too early to give up," Monson thought. "Think. Where could it be? Okay, let's consider the possibilities." He knew that he had his phone this morning. Casey was sure of that. So, if he had his phone this morning, he knew that it was not in his room. That only left a couple of different options. One, he dropped it along the way from the barracks to the GM's dining hall, or from the dining hall to Miss Blake's classroom. Two, he left it in the dining hall, and it was in fact still there. Or three, he had left it in here, and someone picked it up. Would someone have stolen it? While the likelihood of someone in a rich school needing to steal a phone was remote, that was a prospect he would have to consider. He did have both Cyan's and Taurus's contact information in there. There were more than a few people that wanted to get their hands on those little tidbits of data, but becoming the victim of a klepto sure was a depressing thought. He did not want to automatically assume that one of his classmates would have stolen his phone. Instead, he thought he would take the opposite approach. He decided to go ahead and assume that someone picked it up for him and just put it away. A glimmer of hope boiled from within. He sprang back into action, ran over, and rounded the corner of Miss Blake's desk. Teachers had offices elsewhere on campus, but if he was lucky... Monson pulled open the top drawer of Miss Blake's desk, and sure enough, there was his phone. He beamed as he picked it up. Finally, something had gone his way. He froze as voices outside the classroom grew louder. A group of people, a large one from the sound of it, was coming down the hall. The voices sounded adult, most likely teachers. No, there were too many to just be teachers. Monson listened, trying to find distinction in the needed lump of sound. Familiarity was there. At least two, maybe more sounded familiar. But who were the other blokes? Blokes? Where did that Cockney word come from? He put his head in his hand, shaking it. Casey and his stupid accents. The voices were coming closer to the classroom where he was standing, with his hand in the teacher's desk. The teacher's desk. Holy crap. He was so hosed. "Calm down," whispered Monson. "You haven't done anything wrong." Okay, maybe going into Miss Blake's desk without permission was not one of his top 10 smartest moments, but it was just to look for his phone. He was not trying to pry or steal anything or something like that. Regardless of the fact that he was doing nothing wrong, that the odds of the group coming through the door were very low, and that even if they did see him standing there was not any reason to jump to conclusions. Monson hid. He hid like a child trying to avoid a spanking. He threw himself under Miss Blake's massive desk, falling in amongst a cluttered box of what appeared to be wigs and other such items. It was a good thing he did, too, as half a second later, the door to the classroom swung open. "So, this is your classroom." A familiar voice, heavy and musky, peppered the air as a weighted set of footsteps slapped the floor. Many other sets of footsteps followed, including the clip-clap of a woman's heels. Miss Blake was with them. It was her classroom, after all, and she always wore heels. Monson thought it probably made her feel pretty. Miss Blake in her small black dress with her bright red shoes. Oprah always said that it was important to have that splash of color. The reality of the situation sank in, and Monson almost hauled off and smacked himself. He was hiding under a desk in a teacher's room, ditching class, and rifling through said teacher's desk. Yet, Instead of thinking about what he was doing and how much trouble he would be in, he was thinking about splashes of color and shoes. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He really was an idiot. Yes, this is my classroom. The clip-clap came closer to the desk. Miranda was coming towards him. But you already know that. You know where I work. What's the real reason you're here? The man with the heavy voice chuckled.
Huh, what else? Business. My plans have been pushed back because of the disaster last May. Now that my brother has relocated, we have to order our affairs. First, the mundane, then the special interest projects. We stick to the business plan. You know how these things work.
Miss Blake answered, sounding both concerned and unsure. I suppose, but come all the way here? It's dangerous, you know. I assume you heard what happened to the diamond, right under our noses? That is even with the security team here. What are you going to do if you are attacked?
Huh, attacked? Me? Don't be silly. There's not anyone that can hurt me. I'm at my peak.
The man with heavy footsteps made his way towards the desk. You're at your peak? I find that hard to believe. The incident at the bridge left you weak, and you know it.
That was then, my dear. You know what they say.
He did not know why, but Monson thought the way the man placed a heavy emphasis on the word they was as if he was referring to another species.
Time heals all infirmities. But enough about my health. Let me see your latest work. I'm excited to see what you've accomplished.
As you wish, but we must hurry. The assembly is soon, and Miss Green is dying to meet you. Just let me get a few examples from my desk. I keep the various pieces in different locations, for obvious reasons. The clicking of Miranda Blake's shoes was like the sliding snap of a 12-gauge shotgun, pointed directly at Monson. He was screwed. Totally and completely screwed. She was going to catch him and flay him alive. Well, at least his appearance could not get any worse. Stop making jokes! Flashed through his head. Stocking-covered legs came into view as Miranda stepped behind her desk. She moved closer to the opening in a very ladylike way. She started to squat down, bending at the knees and leaning forward. Her entire body, minus her head, was visible now, but she was jittery, like she was under a huge spotlight. Nevertheless, a hand started to move very slowly, reaching towards Monson. He froze. Of course. Whatever the heck she was searching for had to be under the desk. His head fell to his knees. He was not sure how much more he could handle of all this. He closed his eyes and waited for the explosion that was surely to come. Nanoseconds turned into seconds. Seconds turned into minutes. Nothing happened. Did he dare open his eyes? What could he lose at this point? His eyelids lifted slowly, carefully moving the width of an eyelash. He was being melodramatic. He knew that, yet he felt inclined anyway, as he could not clear the image of Miss Blake reaching out a hand to touch scarred, cracking skin, or her staring in from the front of the desk. Ironically enough, he actually picked the one course of action that would make his situation go from bad to worse. If Miss Blake actually found him, best case scenario was him earning the title of pervert. Worst case scenario, never mind. He did not want to think about the worst case scenario. In a single moment of either bravery or stupidity, Monson was not sure which, he fully opened his eyes. He almost started to laugh. The situation was about the furthest thing from funny one could find. To reiterate, he was skipping class, in a classroom without a teacher, trapped under a desk, holding a technically stolen item. A thief and a pervert. That is what they were going to call him, a thief and a pervert. He wondered if he could land a jail cell with a window. Despite his apprehension, Monson actually said a prayer of thanks to that ever-so-elusive god. He counted 2 reasons to be thankful. First, he did not laugh. Praise them all, Allah, Buddha, Christ, Shinto, and every other one that he could think of. The second one was for the scandalous dresses sold at Express. Maybe he should write a letter to the CEO. Miss Blake was struggling, contorting her body like a snake on a pole. Monson watched in fascination as she dipped and undulated in her kneeling position, trying with all her power to obtain the ever-so-elusive object that lay just beyond her reach. This, however, was not the reason that Monson almost started laughing. Not in the least. His reasoning was much simpler and probably more than a little childish. He almost broke into mind-numbing laughter because of the obstacle that Miss Blake was currently facing while trying to search for the unnamed object, namely, her mode of dress. Or, better said, she could not find a way of bending over without flashing the group watching her. Before now, on more than one occasion, Monson wondered how Miranda Blake avoided this kind of trouble due to her style of dress. Not that she was a poster child for modern-day debauchery. Far from it. The woman was just a bit too pretty for her own good. Being as attractive as she was made her choice of clothing a bit more suggestive than it otherwise would be. Now, however, Monson was shouting the praises of whoever let that one pass, even if her writhing figure forced him, or at least made him feel the need to avert his eyes for the time being. Miss Blake struggled for a few more minutes, in which Monson found himself blushing furiously. Then, a heavenly voice played over the intercom, nourishing his ears like manna from heaven. Will all staff and students please make their way to the Coliseum for a special assembly? Attendance is mandatory. Detention for violators, no matter the reason. Thank you. Shoot. Miss Blake snapped her fingers. Well, I will have to show you a bit later. The heavy-voiced man spoke in grunts, though he sounded amused.
Whatever you say, Miranda.
They did not waste another second. Miss Blake stood up, smoothed out her skirt, and walked briskly to the door, clip-clapping the whole way there. The others quickly followed, and the door closed with a slam. Monson let out his pent-up tension, but jumped the moment he did, bumping his head when his phone rang unexpectedly. He answered the phone, rubbing his head as he spoke. Hello? It was Casey. I see you found your phone. Monson rolled his eyes just as they started to water. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Do you have any more morsels of information for me, or did you just call to cite the obvious? Huh, you said obvious twice in one sentence. Casey? Chill, dude. I was just wondering where you were. So, I asked the question. Where are you? It's about that time. You're not going to want to miss this. Supposedly, they're going to tell us what the heck's going on. Whatever. I'm on my way. Save me a seat. Monson hung up his phone. He did his best to remove himself from the desk, but quickly became frustrated. He closed his eyes as he stood up. He was stressed, irritated, and now his head hurt. He kicked the box of wigs. It slid out from under the desk, but only barely. What the heck? Thought Monson. Why are you so heavy? As so often happened, his curiosity flared, overcoming his aggravation. He debated with himself. Look, you just missed a close call. Do you really want to take a chance getting caught doing this? Oh, come on. Nobody's going to know. They're all going to the Coliseum, right? Just a little peek. It's not going to hurt anyone. Yes, it is. He should get out of here right now. Shut up, you pansy. Monson knocked his forehead a few times, then shook it vigorously. He was arguing with himself. Wow, that was about as idiotic as it got. He decided that there could not be any harm in just a small glance. He slid the box out and placed a hand on one of the wigs. Of course, those men did not come here to see a bunch of wigs, so there had to be something besides the wigs, which also explained why the dumb box was so freaking heavy. He pulled the hair away in one jerky movement. He gazed curiously at the remaining contents of the box. Dolls. The box was brimming with dolls. But not just any dolls. Dolls carved of stone and perfectly painted in the likeness of their life-size patterns. Soldiers from every era, Greek, Roman, and Egyptian, just to name a few. Animals of every size, many real, but most fictional, were all in the box. While the miniature replicas of Roman gods and goddesses stood out the most, all of the art pieces sparkled in breathtaking detail. Monson made to grab one, when one doll in particular caught his attention. The miniature was a copy of a schoolgirl wearing a Collin University uniform. The detail was absolutely exquisite, which made Monson wonder if Miss Blake made these. If she did, why was she not teaching art instead of English? Monson grabbed the statue, hoping to examine the dark hair and tawny-colored eyes. Unexpectedly, something zapped him like a spark from an electrical outlet. To his own horror, he dropped the figurine. He tried to grab for it, but his reaction was slow for some reason. The small statuette fell into the basket with a mild clash. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap! He stared at the work of art. He dare not touch it again. He leaned closer, looking to see if he cracked the doll. Good. There did not seem to be any marks. He replaced the wigs and pushed the box back under the desk. He made sure everything was in its place before he left. Monson started walking down the hallway. Man, what a day, he said aloud. It's not even lunch yet. I wonder what else is going to happen. Monson instantly wished he had not said that. For some odd reason, there was fresh wax on the floor. Monson bit it, and bit it hard. His feet slipped out from under him in one of those comical fashions, his whole body becoming almost parallel to the ground before slamming into it. The air rushed from his lungs. He lay there, his head and back throbbing. You've got to be kidding me. He sighed, or tried to, but was finding it hard because of his lack of breath. He closed his eyes thinking, was it Christmas break yet? Seriously, how much bad stuff can happen to one person? Shouldn't there be some sort of rule about that? Monson, are you okay? Monson looked up, his eyes instantly going wide.